and I heard something going. The problem with us when we get to starting about something, we never actually finish it because we branch off into so many damn different directions that every one of them has very important meaning towards what we're discussing in the first place. What we call a Bigfoot and a Sasquatch, we call them boogers in the South. I said, what in the hell is that? One of the trips that Bubba made with us was to Texoma Lake in the southern part of Oklahoma near Durant and along the Texas-Red River border. And we had a good night that night too, didn't we, Tim?
Yeah, we did. We had an interesting occurrence. Bubba stayed there. Let's see. What were you cooking that night, Bubba?
I think it was barbecue, wasn't he? Yeah, wasn't he on the barbecue rack?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were cooking up some hot dogs and I don't know what else. I know I had some briskets on the big smoker because y'all brought that big smoker in on a trailer. Nobody could figure out how to operate it except me.
Yeah.
and I was doing a little ducking and dodging while I was at it too, trying to avoid certain things that were flying my way.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, you were.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And you know, because of that, I wasn't really situationally aware of anything else that was going on except for that particular thing at that time. So, you know, I wasn't privy to the booger that was coming around, skulking around camp.
Yeah. Well, he didn't actually get real close to the camp. I forget now who saw it or Barry. You have to refresh my memory.
We was all gathered up around the campfire that Friday night, and this was when a lot of people had started coming in, and this was another situation where we had people come from Texas, and of course, me and Kumbo and Bubba was from Mississippi and Alabama, and we was one of the ones that had to drive the furthest. We also had Dan Ricky and Vicky was there, and Kelly Mattingly was there, and Robert, and we had Tucklow and CJ and several others there. And we were just, I mean, when you get that many people who kind of know what they're doing with boogers, somebody just can't help themselves, and they'll start doing a booger call from the campground. And, you know, people had been doing that all afternoon, and we were just standing around the campfire. It was about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night when something to the very south of us let out what we call was the bonnet bird. And that revealed a lot to us that night, because what happened is, and I'll never forget it, we was all standing around the campfire, and when this thing vocalized at us with what we consider or call the bonnet bird call, everyone that has any knowledge of Bigfoot knew what it was. But then we had several standing there that had kind of portrayed the fact that they knew more than what they did, and they wanted to stand there and argue with us. I'll never forget that. Me, you, Dan Ricky, CJ, Tucklow, and I think that was it. Yeah, we were.
Vicky knew what it was, and Kelly knew what it was. And what was
immediately?
Yeah, what was the Hispanic lady's name? She knew what the hell it was.
Cindy Goodbreak.
Yeah, Cindy knew exactly what it was. And the thing about it is, damn Vicky takes off down there after it by herself.
Well, she took off. Yeah. Yep.
And Tucklow started yelling at her not to go down there. And Dan starts yelling at her. Well, she's headed down there with a booger, made another vocalization. And I don't think at that time Vicky didn't know what she was getting herself into.
No, she didn't. I think at that point in time she was. It's not that she was trying to impress anybody. She was just really. I mean, that's the first.
Well, she had a camera. She had she had a camera that was supposedly. It wasn't infrared or anything, but it was really, really good in low light, ultra low light. And it was that Sony, one of Sony's first cameras they built for really low light conditions. Is back in the late 1990s, early 2000 time period. And she took off down there wanting to get a picture of it. Well, the thing about it is, do what?
By herself.
By herself, exactly. And there was a bunch of us. We'd kicked our shoes off, and we were just all around the campfire, just chilling. And Tucklow jumped up and snatched his boots back on and took off after her. And was trying to tell her to, wait, don't go down there by yourself. And anyway, I yanked my boots home, didn't even lace them up, and we took off. There was about three of us took off after her, and I think Kelly was one of them, trying to tell her to Vicky, don't go down there. And here Vicky goes, and when she came around the end of that little scope of woods that the booger was behind, that was down there on the shore, we heard a big whoosh, and the son of a gun dove back in the water. And we got down there, and there was a big rock. Oh, I'd say that rock was probably 30 feet long, and at the widest place, maybe 10, 11 feet wide. And you could see where it had come up out of the water up onto that rock, and where it had been standing, when and where it had hollered at us. And you could see the tracks very clearly. The wet tracks. You'd see where it had where the water had been running off of its hair and all that. And the thing that impressed me is I had grabbed my spotlight. Yep. And I had a 3 million candle power cordless spotlight, and I had managed to grab that before I took off down there. And I started shining that thing across the water, and it had to have been going away from us across this big slough. We knew, because if it had gone anywhere else, it'd have come out right in plain view. And that thing swam underwater for about, what'd you figure across that thing, Bear? 200 yards?
Oh, it had to have been that, if not 250. It was a ways across there. I mean, it stayed. Remember, it was cool that night, and it had condensation coming off the water, which created a fog type effect. And every time you were trying to cut through it with that spotlight, the fog was reflecting it back on you. But go ahead with your story.
Yeah, I couldn't see. We couldn't see the surface of the water very good once it got out there about probably about 60, 70 yards. But the water was just other than the ripples that it made when it jumped in, the water was just smooth as glass, literally. And we didn't hear any splashing or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, there it was over there on the other side, and it had already come up out of the water, and it was going up into the woods. And we caught it in the spotlight, and I think it yelled at us one more time.
It did. It screamed at us. It screamed at us from the other bank. So what happened is, when Vicky took off walking toward it, she heard the general vicinity where this thing had originally vocalized from. But when she took off, the angle of travel that she went, she actually had it hemmed up on a sort of peninsula. And
that's exactly right.
When all of us took off after Vicky, we was actually herding it towards it. It had nowhere to go but to hit that water. I mean, if it would have had to run smooth over there was 5 or 6 of us. I was one of them down there. You was, Tuflo, Dan, Kelly. But when we got down there, we had already hemmed this thing up, and he realized real quick that, his only option was to hit that water, and he hit it.
Yeah, he did.
Because we all heard the splash, and as Tim just described, there was a big limestone rock right there on the bank, and you could see where this thing had crawled up out of the lake. The ground was saturated, and then it had stepped around a spot or two, because when the water was falling off the hair, it was obliterating the tracks itself when it stepped over here to the right or to the left. But it was rapidly drying. It was kind of a cool night. And then that thing just hit the water, and we all heard it when it hit the water. And that's when Tim run over there immediately to the bank. And we saw the ripples where it hit the water. And then...
Oh, it looked like somebody had run a Volkswagen off in the water.
Yeah, it did.
Or, well, no, not a Volkswagen. It would have floated. A Ford Pinto. Yeah.
But that was one of our adventures that we had down there at Texoma.
Yeah.
That was also the weekend, too, where we made a day trip that Saturday. I don't think Bubba went with us because he was minding the grill, but that was the first time that me and you had ever been to Brown Springs with them. Remember? We went to Brown Springs that Saturday.
Oh, boy.
Would you like to share your impression of Brown Springs to everybody?
Well, we went in there in broad daylight, and my skin crawled the whole time we were in there. That place that's one of the most evil, ominous feeling places that I've ever been. It was ungodly creepy. And, I felt like that we were being watched the whole time we were in there, and, going up there, climbing up that bank and seeing those old tombstones and everything. It was creepy. And, I know I wouldn't want to be down there after dark.
That place got quite the reputation,
Oh, yeah, it does.
Well, what originally got our attention about Brown Springs was this newspaper reporter outside of Thackerville, Oklahoma, which he's retired now, and his name is Butch Bridges. He was also an investigative reporter, and he had a scanner, and he kept his scanner on the whole time. There was a couple out of Texas, which right there at Brown Springs is where I-35 crosses from Dallas to Oklahoma City, and it crosses the Red River right there. And his scanner started going off bright and early one Saturday morning, so, he found out through his interpretation of what was being said as to the location. So he jumped in his vehicle and headed down there to Brown Springs. What he came upon was there was this car. They had already done taped off the area, and it being that early in the morning, there wasn't a lot of people around there other than other law enforcement officers, state troopers, all kind of, I think there was a couple of ambulances there and all these squad cars around. But the officers knew Butch, and they knew that as long as they told him to keep it off the records, he wouldn't print it. But what he came upon was there was a body found with it was a male. He wasn't wearing any clothes. His head had been twisted all completely around, looking over his back. They found a young lady on the hood of the car, and she was completely nude, laying on a blanket on the hood of the car. And her eyes were wide open, the whole 9 yards. She had been ripped open all across her stomach. And the best they were able to determine what had happened was this young couple had went parking, and they did a background check, and they come from Texas into Oklahoma. And it's just an awful path type spot where, you know, people had gone parking there in the past. Evidently, they never had heard the stories that me and Kumbo and the rest of us knew of this area. They never would have went there. But they was getting a groove on the hood of the car, and something walked up behind the young man and just grabbed him by his head and twisted his head all the way around and threw him over there next to where the small pond was that the springs flow into. That's why they call it Brown Springs. It's kind of like another, I mentioned artesian well earlier. That's water that comes out of the ground, and it runs continuously into this little pond right there. And his body was found next to the cane and the all this up next to the bank, whereas her body was found on top of the car with her eyes wide open. They found bruise marks between her thighs that showed that her heart was still beating to cause a bruise. So this is just one of those cases that, you know, a lot of people know of, but then again, a lot more people don't know nothing about it. We asked, and I'm bringing that up, and it, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the 7 stages to get to, what's his name, you know, that game they play all the time. Well, John, our good buddy out of North Dakota, Devils Fall, North Dakota, who come down here on the trip to Red Bay, Alabama, where we recorded the T-Rex screen. He had the means to go through the, I think it's called the CIC. It's records that police officers have.
NCIC.
That's it.
National Crime Information Computer.
Yeah. He had the means to go through his records because he had access to, because he was really interested in this. He had heard us mention this case before. And me and Kumbo, we said, well, hey, man, you can find out about this easier than we ever could, because nothing's ever, as far as we knew, this case is still an unsolved case. And we said, well, do us a favor. You don't have to give us any details. When you get back home, check into this and see if there's any merit to this, or if this is an old wives' tale that a lot of people are just telling about. A couple of months later, I think Kumbo was the one who got the phone call about it. And he asked our buddy from North Dakota if he checked into that, and he said, yeah, I did. And he said the case is still unsolved. And this really happened right there at Brown Springs. And we had heard of this happening there, and we just wanted to, since we was that close to Thackerville from Texoma, we decided to go check this area out. When we was there, we even walked to the banks of the Red River, and we was seeing not only hog tracks, but we was also seeing Bigfoot tracks on the banks, wasn't we, Tim?
Yep. Yeah, you better believe we were. And that's the largest concentration of them I've ever seen was there. It was.
They were a spooky location.
Yeah, it was. It was it is a bad place. Like I said, that's one of those. That's one of the few places I won't go at night.
I agree with you on that.
There's a few around, and that's one of them. You won't catch me there after dark.
Well, everything I've told of, and for the safety of the listeners, I've heard, because I inquire about Brown Springs periodically, and all that is now private property, and you just can't get in there. And I'm just mentioning that because if any listeners, I mean, they can find it on their maps. It's located, and actually we told where it's at, but it is private property. I think you can go to the cemetery on top of the hill, but
I'll pass something else along that Barry, you may or may not remember it, but I came across these here the other day. I stumbled across them. there were some people took some pictures of some of the tombstones in that cemetery, and in several of those pictures, there are faces that showed up on those tombstones in the lichens and stuff like that. You've seen those, haven't you, Bear?
You know me. If I can't punch it in the nose, I don't want to hear nothing about it. I don't want nothing to do with it. I am a chicken shit. No, sir. I don't do ghosts. I don't do dog men. I don't do no Lucifer. I'm not saying they ain't there. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I just don't want to know.
Well, these things been floating around for years. I mean, these pictures have, and I finally I stumbled across them the other day, and I just decided I'm just going to look at those things. And sure enough, I could see what they were talking about in them, but it may just be coincidental, lichens growing on the thing. It does look like one of them looked like a little baby's face or something. But
history shows that area has had a very violent past for centuries.
Yeah, it was an outlaw hideout. It was an outlaw hideout during a good part of the 1800s.
Well, when that area was Indian territory, I mean, outlaws and bandits and the Kiowa and the Comanche Indian tribe would use that crossing there to raid southward. Anybody that was robbed a bank or killed somebody in Texas, all they had to do was cross the Red River north right in there to evade the Texas Rangers or whatever that was following them. There was an old wagon trail that crossed there that Indians and certain tribes and outlaws and bandits would waylay people right there, rob them and kill people. That whole place, as our good buddy Dan Rickey would say, is bad juju. Yeah, and a lot of bad. You can feel it. You can feel it when you get in that area. I mean, and I don't even. I'm not one that goes and base a lot of things on places that just make the hair stand up on the back of my head, but that's one of those places that does.
Well, I'm usually very, very skeptical of that kind of stuff. I've walked into all kind of places that I wouldn't go in there. I go in there, and I'm not normally scared of cat about stuff, but that's one of the very few places that I've been to that I won't be in there after dark. And I know that place you sent me up there, the damn Holly Springs National Forest, is one of those places, Bear. And Clint and I went in there, and he was smarter than his old man.
The one near Faulkner?
That's it. That's it.
I remember that.
Yeah, we got in there, and we were driving back in there. Clint and I were by ourselves in Bo, and I kept getting, the further we went back in there, the creepier I got to feeling. But I was putting on a good front, and we whooped up in front of that old cemetery back there, and I got out. Bo got the back seat and hunkered down in the floorboard.
For those who don't know, Bo was Spoonbull and traveling companion, a Russian shepherd, not a German shepherd, a Russian shepherd, and he was a Russian member of the Outlaws. Yeah. He was a member of the Outlaws.
Yeah, and Bo knew boogers.
Well, what do we always say? That campaign come out about Bo Jackson. Well, our Bo knows too. Bo knows.
Yeah. Bo, when we pulled up there, he was standing in his usual place up on the console. Back feet his back feet were on the back seat, and his front feet were up on the console. And when I got opened the door and hopped out. Come on, Bo. He got in the back seat. And I said, come on, Bo. And I opened the back door, reached in there for him, and he got out and hunkered down in the dadgum floorboard and braced himself off, and I could not get him out of that truck. And I said, come on, son. And he, to my boy, no, I'm going to stay in the truck, Daddy. I don't want to get out of here. And this is still daylight. And but it was getting dusky dark. It was getting towards dusk. And I got out and looked around a little bit, and man, my skin was crawling the whole time. And I decided that I wasn't going to go through that gate into that old graveyard. And I poked around, looked around, and this is one of those places. It was just like an almost impenetrable jungle right up to the edge of the road and right up to the edge of that cemetery. You couldn't see 2 feet back into that place. And finally, I got the truck. We fired up, and I started looking for, riding the roads around there and trying to, sort of learn the area a little bit. There were little old logging roads and stuff all around, and we came back and came back about the time it got dark, and I went riding down through there, and Clint had the doors locked, windows all up, and wouldn't even sit right next to the door. He was scrunched over next to the console, and Bo was hunkered down in the back seat just driving down through there, and that just totally wasn't like him. And I decided that, well, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to get out. It was creepy as all get out. And that was one of those places I would not have been surprised to see a Jersey Devil or a dog man or something like that run across the road in front of me. That was
well. Since you mentioned that, and we mentioned Brown Springs, let's talk about another place that gave me and you fits when we went to it. And that was that thing on the Natchez River down there outside of Boynton Springs.
Yeah.
Now that area there, we had a hell of an adventure that night, did we not?
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, that was that was a heck of a place there. That's I wouldn't we go in there. We'll go. I'd go back in there, but I'd go right back in there where we did our calling and everything from. But there's some old stuff back in those woods there that I wouldn't go messing around. No way.
People have done research in that area since me and you have been there the few times I have, and they actually use slave labor and Native American Caddo Indian or Tatonka Indian tribe labor, and people have mentioned that, there's a lot of people that perished or passed away or died cruelly in that location. And you could feel the vibes off that area, and it didn't help that place was loaded down with boogers to take advantage of it either, did it?
Yeah, and the Caddo Indian in that area have a legend about a tribe that there's another tribe that lives down there in that big thicket area, and that they're cannibals, that they eat people.
Yep. They were called. I may be mispronouncing the Cowatonkas, but they called them the Tonka Indians, Towka, Tonka. Yeah, I know what you're talking
about.
Like
that. Yeah. That they're cannibalistic. There's a cannibalistic Indian tribe that lives down in there, and that's sort of like over in Oklahoma. There was an area that I can't remember which tribe. There were two tribes that used to come down into Oklahoma from up north. And there was an area there in central Oklahoma, west central Oklahoma, that they would not go through that area. And it turns out it's that area sort of around Binger and Anadarko and the Concho and all that area in there. They would not go through that area because there was a tribe of I forget what their word for them was, but it was basically Bigfoot, you know, that lived in that area, and they would not cross their property because they'd kill them.
Yep.
You didn't, and so they would make a very wide berth around this area where the boogers lived.
Yeah, that's the area that we
I don't remember what they called them.
Discussing right on our last show, and you're absolutely correct, because the Pawnee was a mortal enemy of the Kiowa and the Comanche, and they would come down to steal the horses, go on a horse raid or whatever down there, and they would avoid that area of Oklahoma. And well, you've been to Purgatory. You already know. I've been to Purgatory. That's an area you stay away from in the especially at night. Hell, it's enough fun as it is to go through there in the daytime.
Oh yeah.
But that area is loaded with boogers. Yeah, that whole section up and through Binger, all in there.
Yeah.
We had a outing at my place in Mississippi where it was me, you, Bubba, Daniel Perkins, and Vicky. You brought your war wagon and your camper down there.
Yep.
And we was all staying in the camper. You remember that night?
Oh yeah.
I want Bubba to get in on this part.
Yeah, but I was there and I do remember it.
Yeah.
It's not booger related, but we had went out all over creation that night. We had no more people with us than we had. We tried to get in one vehicle, which when we did, there was no room for both. And there was no room for Vicky's little dog called Max. He was a schnauzer. And so Vicky
Bo and Max were buddies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Vicky had pinned Max up in she called it his cubby, but what it was, one of them little carry kennels, you know, that people put smaller dogs in to tote around, and
little dog crate. Yeah.
And we had just driven all over the country that night, all around in areas that I grew up in, and we was calling in boogers and all this. Just had generally a good night. We was heading back.
It was drizzling. It was drizzling rain and foggy, and it's perfect night for the boogers to be moving.
Yep,
real quiet at night.
Here we come back to my home property.
I'll let Bubba tell it.
Yeah, we'll let Bubba tell this story. And we saw this eye shine in the road in front of us.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, there's a booger. And then it's like, well, no, it's too low to the ground. Get up there and Bo's out. So Bo, Tim Kumbo says, what are you doing out? Well, no big deal. Nobody thought anything about it. So Tim goes up, he unlocks that camper door, and when he yanks open, there is a tornado of styrofoam in the middle of the living room. Old Bo had decided he wanted out, and he completely destroyed the camper. I mean, he went through the screen, the first layer of fiberglass, completely through the styrofoam out the door, and was almost completely through the outer cover. You can see claw marks, shining through. Yeah. And he had hit every window in there, had been on every table, tore up every blind, and the emergency egress window was next to the door. And he had hit that window enough times till he popped one of the latches on it, and it opened up. And that's how Bo got out. He ran 10-10 out the window.
Yep.
And I remember Kumbo, he was just sick, because, the war wagon, that was his baby. And he's like, Bo, you son of a bitch, I ought to kill you. And and I told old Clint, I think you need to get Bo. You need to be way over yonder, for a little while. And so old Kumbo finally calmed down and got Bo back over there and said, some bitch, I ought to kill you. But I know you're just doing it because you love me. But I've never seen such a mess that one animal could do to the inside of anything. Like I said, he tore up every blind.
That damn place.
Yeah. He cut his paws up. digging through the fiberglass, so there were bloody footprints everywhere. Combined with the styrofoam that was just completely shredded, we had us a fine time for a couple hours trying to straighten that out so we could sleep that night. And during all this, Bear had Vicky convinced that a booger didn't have Max's crate and was headed up the hill with it. Going to have some supper. Remember that?
Well, yeah, I told her when we saw Bo in the road bed, which he was about, I guess, half a mile from the camper, because when we saw the eye shine in the road, we never would have thought it would have been Bo, but at that point in time, there was nobody else in that part of the country. No dogs should be running around. Nobody that had a pet dog running around. Closer we got up to it, there was Bo. And everybody said, well, what in the hell is Bo doing out of the damn camper? Something doesn't happen. And Vicky had got upset about her poor schnauzer in that little kennel box. And I said, Vicky, don't worry about it, baby. I said, that's just like a pig in a blanket. The booger has done broke into that camper, and he's toting Max on up the hill just like a pig in the blanket. She was all upset over that. What are y'all guys talking about?
Right, and we're talking a very desolate area. I mean, it's like a certain place in Egypt that we all know love. No lights, no nothing. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's nothing there. There were no neighbors around there. That's the weird thing is that there was no houses or anything nearby. So when we came up on Bo out in the middle of the road, a half a mile away, is like, what in the hell's been going on? Why are you out? And,
exactly, and like Kubo says, if we got that war wagon stuck back there, it'd still be there today. We would not have knocked it out.
Yeah, we were.
Well. Me and Kumbo have talked about that over the years, and already knowing what is on my property, already knowing how Bo is about boogers anyway, and I mean, we have left Kumbo's dog behind before, and he has never reacted like that. And me and Tim have discussed this several times over the years. This was very unlike behavior for Bo. He was he wanted out of there. He wanted out of there. I wonder at times if, already knowing that, boogers were on my property, and we just decided to go other places to see if we could rile them up, because we had been to my property several times in the past, and they was more used to us doing vocals from there, and they had got to the point where they just didn't answer us anymore. They'd just come on in. Tim will tell you this, because I think the first time Tim ever been to my place, it didn't take, we wasn't there, 15 minutes, and you knew when they come up there to where we was at?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I heard the 800-pound tree frog coming through the woods. The tree frog, the little spring peepers are sitting there going, that little noise that they make, and then all of a sudden I hear, and here he comes down the dadgum hill, and the son of a gun walked up behind a little thicket of privet hedge and was standing there looking over the hedge at us. And I thought I heard, I could hear him over there, and sort of pissed him off. I was surprised that he got in there on us that close, that quickly, and that brazenly. That was my first experience with bears boogers, and I throwed a flashlight on right in his face, and he threw his arms up and whirled around and left. I don't think he came back that night, or not while we were outside anyway. But
I think once he recognized me and he seen me there, he was probably satisfied. He just didn't know why I had brought 3 other people there that evening. It was just one of them odd situations. Another time on our property when we had a camp out right there, we had a yard full of tents. That was the night that one poked Sammy through his tent. You remember that, Tim?
Vaguely, yeah. I remember him talking about it, yeah.
Well, Sammy,
you were. I think you were there on that trip, weren't you?
Bubba was there.
Now, that's when Awesome Possum was there.
Okay. That's the one. That's the one where they went deer hunting. He went deer hunting barefoot and killed a doe. That's the one.
That's right. That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's where I smoked the venison haunch.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that was good.
Awesome.
Anyway, Tim, do you remember when Possum went up that hill? You know, he left the camp at about 5:30 that morning, which it was still dark.
Right.
And, his daughter.
And I told him where to go, and told him that a doe will come through there, which a doe did. And I said, "You shoot her." Or I wanted his daughter to actually shoot her, but I said, just, shoot a doe. It's legal. It was deer season. Everything was legal and above board. And I said, now look, when you start up that hill, them boogers going to pace you up that hill, which, he believed me, but he had something happen that really convinced him. When you come out of my back pasture to go up to the hill, there's a power line right there, and it's real growed up. And when him and his daughter stepped from my side of the farm lot onto that power line, that booger growled at him. Remember him telling about that, Tim?
Yeah, I do. And something
that's the first. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, he said that was the very first time because, see, he knew about boogers from Georgia. This guy, hunts and fish in the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, and he has never had one growl at him. And he said that thing growled at him and vibrated his chest, and he said, "Bear, I have never had one growl at me like that thing did."
Yeah.
And he said, if you hadn't already told me to expect him to pace me up that hill, I probably would have turned right back around and come back to the camp. But he said we was sort of prepared for this because you had told me when I went up there in the dark that these things was going to pace me all the way top the hill. And he said, you was absolutely correct. He said, when I stepped through into that opening and he scented me and saw me, of course, the booger didn't recognize him. That's the first time Possum ever been on my property. And that thing growled at him. And when he growled at Possum said, "Bear, that thing vibrated my chest." And he said, I don't get spooked very often, but he said, that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, plus he had his daughter with him. Yeah, he had his daughter with him that morning, if I remember right.
Yep. Yeah, and, he was with him.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
Yeah, and she heard it too. I remember that she heard it. And
well, remember, I cleaned that deer up there on the slope of that hill just above the pond.
Right.
And remember, after I cleaned the deer, we left all the heart, the lungs, the stomach content, the guts, everything there, and we did it on purpose. I'll let y'all tell what y'all found the next day.
It was gone. Didn't find nothing. It's all gone.
All right. But what would a coyote have done if they'd have found it?
Oh, they'd have wallered it around and fought and scrubbed up the ground, and they either had a big old smeared up place, and you'd have found some of the little tatters of some of the stuff would have still been around. But this they had just come in there, and they just picked it all up, gathered it all up, and toted it all off. And it was very neatly. There was not all the when the coyotes have been into it, they make they waller up the ground there pretty bad, and this wasn't done that way at all. It was go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Tell about what you found in regard to a raccoon does this too, but tell what you found along the banks of that creek up there at Red Bay that time when we hit the woods looking around for physical evidence about that bone pile, Tim.
Well, I was looking for them because I've found them on the back of the farm over there next to the river, my whole life.
Right.
Especially in the wintertime and in the early spring before anything's greened up, and they're hurting for protein and stuff pretty badly. They'll get down there and they'll catch fish and stuff, and of course some of the ones that are easier to catch and are close to the bank and up a lot of times are carp and gar, and they when they eat them they're pretty neat, and apparently they like to, because I looked for them there there at down near Red Bay, and I found the same thing I found on my farm. It looks like that they sit down and squat down and lean back against the base of a tree, and they sit there and they dismantle those fish, and they'll somehow they peel the scales off, and there'll be a pile of scale there, and as they eat it, they'll pile up the bones real neatly, and you'll find a lot of times the head of the fish will be laying there, but there'll be a pile of scales and a pile of bones. And we got up on that ridge above that creek and went walking down through there and found a number of those bone piles, just like what I was used to seeing back there on the back of my farm next to the river. But I've said it's something I've seen on my whole life. And it's usually in the late winter, early spring when or on up into the spring when I find that kind of stuff, because I didn't know why it was sort of seasonal like that, way back there, but I figured out that it's because there ain't a whole lot of food left in the woods by the time you hit along about February and up into March and stuff, and until it gets good and greened up in April, there's not much food in the woods for anything. Even the deer are suffering. Everything is suffering. So those boogers are living on a lot more fish than they do otherwise.
Right. Would you mind relating? I know you've done it a time or two, but I don't know if you've done it recently anywhere. Would you mind relating about finding those deer carcasses that time on your property up there? Would you mind sharing that with the group?
I would find. I would be back along the river, and I would find a dead deer laying there, and the weird thing about it I got to noticing is sort of a common denominator of them is their bellies would be torn open, and the guts, the entrails, the intestines would be laying off in a pile over there to one side, and the lungs would be laying there in a pile. The liver and the heart would be gone, and the kidneys would be gone. And the deer, most of the time, otherwise would be intact. And this is in the late fall and early part of the winter. But almost always, one or both of the back legs would be twisted and broken. And one day I was back there, and this was back in 1979, and I found found 4 deer laying there, lined up, all of them with their head pointed in the same direction, and their legs pointed in the same direction. They were all laying there on their sides, and they were about 15 to 20 feet apart. Like I said, all laying in an identical position, and they were all were about the same age dead. And now this is back before we had coyotes to speak of on our place. So nothing had been, they weren't torn apart or anything. Nothing had been, they weren't chewed on and stuff like that, like the coyotes chew on them. And, I, didn't know what was going on. Well, later on, I figured it out. I had already figured out what was doing this by the time I found those 4 deer like that. But the interesting thing was that one of those deer had been killed right there. There was hair all over the ground, tufts of hair and stuff, and there was hair hung in the barks of the trees, and there was even hair like 10, 11 feet up into this tree, hung in the bark, where that was very obvious that deer had been caught by the back legs and had been beat to death on a couple of trees that were right there close by. And the really creepy thing about that, when I had found those 4 deer like that, I stood there looking at them and everything and checking them out. Well, I went on easing through the woods, and I was not deer hunting, I was squirrel hunting, so I just had a 22 with me. And over on about 2 more ridges to the east of there, I came up on top of a ridge. There is another deer laying there, and this dude is still slightly warm. But it was facing in the same direction as the other ones, and the legs were pointing in the same direction, and the same thing. The abdominal cavity had been torn open, the intestines put out in one little pile, and the lungs in another little pile, and the guts were gone. I mean, the liver, the heart, and the kidneys. Actually, I don't know if I didn't look in there to see if the kidneys were gone out of that one, but I sat there and strongly considered dragging that back to the house, dragging it out to one of the log roads and getting it, taking it home with, because it was so fresh, and it was not spoiled. And I just got a feeling that I better not mess with it. I better just leave it there.
One thing that we have noticed, and I don't mind sharing this with all the Bigfoot enthusiasts out there, the leg that this thing usually breaks when it grabs, say, a deer or a coyote or whatever, a dog or whatever, the limb that it usually breaks, it's almost in a twisting motion, because it's like this thing grabs it and it swings it, around and drives it head first into the trunk of a tree. We have noticed that they utilize this means of killing their prey, and it makes perfect sense. Say if it grabbed a coyote, first thing coyote's going to do is try to defend itself. It's going to turn around and bite the hell out of it. And we have come to the conclusion that these things will stand next to the trunk of trees alongside game trails, and it'll grab whatever limb it can of whatever's coming along that game trail, and will use the momentum in the process of grabbing that leg, and it'll keep on in its apex and slam that carcass, which is not a carcass at the time because it's alive, into the trunk of the tree as hard as it can. Sometimes they have to do this twice. One thing we have noticed, I know Tim mentioned that it did take the lungs, the heart, the liver, and the kidney, but when it does decide to harvest all the meat it can from that carcass, that the only part of that animal it will not take with it is the limb or the leg that it grabbed. It's like that part was bruised internally when it, due to the impact, it would break the leg bone inside that carcass, and it would naturally bruise all the surrounding meat in that area. That's why a lot of times when people send me pictures or video of game kills that they've run across, and if I see that one of the legs is still attached to the skeleton or to the carcass, 9 times out of 10, that's the clue that gives me the fact that a Bigfoot was the one who done this. Do you concur, Tim?
Yeah. Yep. Especially if it's been twisted and broken, and you can look at how the bone fractures, and see that it was twisted when it broke. Yeah, it's definitely that way, and we've seen I've seen this with dogs and other things besides just and calves and stuff like that have been killed by the boogers. But I know, for the longest time I'd find them like this, and I didn't know to look at the entrails. Now they wouldn't usually take the lungs, but in the fall and early winter, they would usually get the heart and the liver and the kidneys. And as they get further into winter, they take more and more of it. They'll eat more and more of the meat on it. And we'd find them where they'd rip the front shoulders off of them, or rip one of the hindquarters off of them. And one thing used to break my heart is that they would they would usually leave the tenderloins on them. The loins, and I say, golly, man, wasting the best part of the deer. But that's.
I think their body has a need for certain
right
parts of their prey quicker than it does other parts, even though they will eat the whole carcass. Another thing that we found out too that usually indicates whether this is something that was harvested or killed by Bigfoot is nothing else will touch that carcass. Not a buzzard, not a coyote, or nothing else will take that carcass off.
It had come up out of the water up onto that rock, and where it had been standing, when and where it had hollered at us, and you can see the tracks very clearly. The wet tracks, you'd see where it had where the water had been running off of its hair and all that. And the thing that impressed me is I had grabbed my spotlight.
Yep.
And I had a 3 million candle power cordless spotlight, and I had managed to grab that before I took off down there. And I started shining that thing across the water, and it had to have been going away from us across this big slough. We knew, because if it had gone anywhere else, it'd have come out right in plain view. And that thing swam underwater for about, what'd you figure across that thing, Bear? 200 yards?
Oh, it had to have been that, if not 250. It was a ways across there. I mean, it
stayed.
Remember, it was cool that night, and it had condensation coming off the water, which created a fog type effect. And every time you were trying to cut through it with that spotlight, the fog was reflecting it back on you. But go ahead with your story.
Yeah, I couldn't see. We couldn't see the surface of the water very good once it got out there about probably about 60, 70 yards. But the water was just as, other than the ripples that it made when it jumped in, the water was just smooth as glass, literally. And we didn't hear any splashing or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, there it was over there on the other side, and it had already come up out of the water, and it was going up into the woods. And, you know, we caught it in the spotlight. And I think it yelled at us one more time.
It did. It screamed at us. It screamed at us from the other bank. Because what happened is,
you have to refresh my memory.
We was all gathered up around the campfire that Friday night, and this was when a lot of people had started coming in, and this was another situation where we had people come from Texas, and of course, me and Kumbo and Bubba was from Mississippi and Alabama, and we was one of the ones that had to drive the furthest. We also had Dan Ricky, and Vicky was there, and Kelly Mattingly was there, and Robert, and we had Tucklow and CJ and several others there. And we were just, I mean, when you get that many people who kind of know what they're doing with boogers, somebody just can't help themselves, and they'll start doing a booger call from the campground. And, you know, people had been doing that all afternoon, and we were just standing around the campfire. It was about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night when something to the very south of us let out what we call was the bonnet bird. And that revealed a lot to us that night, because what happened is, and I'll never forget it, we was all standing around the campfire, and when this thing vocalized at us with what we consider or call the bonnet bird call, everyone that has any knowledge of Bigfoot knew what it was. But then we had several standing there that had kind of portrayed the fact that they knew more than what they did, and they wanted to stand there and argue with us. I'll never forget that. Me, you, Dan Ricky, CJ, Tucklow, and I think that was it. Yeah, we were.
Vicky knew what it was, and Kelly knew what it was. And what was
immediately?
What was the Hispanic lady's name? She knew what the hell it was.
Cindy Goodbreak.
Yeah, Cindy knew it. Cindy knew exactly what it was. And the thing about it is,
and I heard something going. The problem with us when we get to starting about something, we never actually finish it, because we branch off into so many damn different directions that every one of them has very important meaning towards what we're discussing in the first place. What we call a Bigfoot and a Sasquatch, we call them boogers in the South. I said, what in the hell is that? One of the trips that Bubba made with us was to Texoma Lake in the southern part of Oklahoma, near Durant and along the Texas Red River border. And we had a good night that night too, didn't we, Tim?
Yeah, we did. We had an interesting occurrence. Bubba stayed there. Let's see. What were you cooking that night, Bubba?
I think it was barbecue, wasn't he? Yeah, wasn't he on the barbecue rack?
Yeah.
I think I was we were cooking up some hot dogs, and I don't know what else. I know I had some briskets on the big smoker, because y'all brought that big smoker in on a trailer. Nobody could figure out how to operate it except me.
Yeah.
and I was doing a little ducking and dodging while I was at it too, trying to avoid certain things that were flying my way.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, you were.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And you know, because of that, I wasn't really situation aware of anything else that was going on except for that particular thing at that time. So, yeah. You know, I wasn't privy to the booger that was coming around, skulking around camp.
Yeah, well, he didn't actually get real close to the camp. I forget now who saw it, or damn Vicky takes off down there after it by herself.
Well, she took off. Yeah. Yep.
And Tucklow started yelling at her not to go down there, and Dan starts yelling at her. Well, she's headed down there with a booger, made another vocalization, and I don't think at that time Vicky didn't know what she was getting herself into.
No, she didn't. I think at that point in time she was. It's not that she was trying to impress anybody. She was just really. I mean, that's the first.
Well, she had a camera. She had a camera that was supposedly. It wasn't infrared or anything, but it was really, really good in low light, ultra low light. And it was that Sony, one of Sony's first cameras they built for really low light conditions. It back in the late 1990s, early 2000 time period. And she took off down there wanting to get a picture of it. Well, the thing about it is, do what?
By herself.
By herself, exactly. And there was a bunch of us. We'd kicked our shoes off, and we were just all around the campfire, just chilling. And Tucklow jumped up and snatched his boots back on and took off after her. And was trying to tell her to, wait, don't go down there by yourself. And anyway, I yanked my boots home, didn't even lace them up, and we took off. There was about three of us took off after her, and I think Kelly was one of them, trying to tell her to Vicky, don't go down there. And here Vicky goes, and when she came around the end of that little scope of woods that the booger was behind, that was down there on the shore, we heard a big whoosh, and the son of a gun dove back in the water. And we got down there, and there was a big rock. Oh, I'd say that rock was probably 30 feet long, and at the widest place, maybe 10, 11 feet wide. And you could see where it was.
When Vicky took off walking toward it, she heard the general vicinity where this thing had originally vocalized from. But when she took off, the angle of travel that she went, she actually had it hemmed up on a sort of peninsula. And
that's exactly right.
When all of us took off after Vicky, we was actually herding it towards it. It had nowhere to go but to hit that water. I mean, if it would have had to run smooth over. There was 5 or 6 of us. I was one of them down there. You was, Tucklow, Dan, Kelly. But when we got down there, we had already hemmed this thing up, and he realized real quick that, his only option was to hit that water, and he hit it.
Yeah, he did.
Because we all heard the splash, and as Tim just described, there was a big limestone rock right there on the bank, and you could see where this thing had crawled up out of the lake. The ground was saturated, and then it had stepped around a spot or two, because when the water was falling off the hair, it was obliterating the tracks, except when it stepped over here to the right or to the left. But it was rapidly drying. It was kind of a cool night. And then that thing just hit the water, and we all heard it when it hit the water. And that's when Tim run over there immediately to the bank. And we saw the ripples where it hit the water. And then...
Oh, it looked like somebody had run a Volkswagen off in the water.
Yeah, it did.
Or, no, not a Volkswagen. It would have floated. A Ford Pinto. Yeah.
But that was one of our adventures that we had down there at Texoma.
Yeah.
That was also the weekend, too, where we made a day trip that Saturday. I don't think Bubba went with us because he was minding the grill, but that was the first time that me and you had ever been